Hi, everybody. Ron Placone here. So, if you're a millennial like me, or maybe if you're a Gen Xer, or even if you're a little bit older or a little bit younger, quite frankly, there is a good chance that Nirvana played a role in your life or plays a role in your musical diet or musical selections. And I know for me, that's certainly the case. I'm a huge Nirvana fan and have been for years, and I've reached a point in my life where I've been a Nirvana fan at this point a lot longer than I haven't been. Most of the years of my life at this point, I think about two-thirds of them, I've been a fan of that band, maybe a little more even at this point, because I got into them when I was really young. And a lot of my other musical tastes, I kind of can trace it back to Nirvana because I missed the boat. I was, a little too young to catch it when it was happening, so I discovered it later, and by the time I discovered it, Kurt Cobain was already dead. So I read a lot of the books about the band, "Come as You Are" by Michael Azerrad, and all the other books. The Michael Azerrad book was the biggest one, at least to me it was. And they talked a lot about the different music that Kurt listened to, and some of the stuff I was familiar with, the classic rock stuff. He was really into the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. But there was this other thing called punk rock. I didn't really know what that was. I didn't know Black Flag or anything like that, or Bad Brains, or all these bands that Kurt would talk about, that Kurt listened to. But I knew I wanted to discover all that stuff. And I found someone in my neighborhood. There was one other kid that was into punk rock. He was already into it. I wanted to get into it. He was already into it. So I discovered punk rock kind of through him and kind of through my books about Nirvana. I would find these band names and I would track them down. I was like, what is Black Flag? What is that all about? And I took it from there. So anyway, big Nirvana fan, and Montage of Heck was released recently. This was an HBO film under the guidance of Frances Bean Cobain, his daughter, and others. That was released on Kurt Cobain, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. First of all, one of the things that we've seen in the press is that members of his family have expressed some frustrations over the film, due to some of the scenes showing him under the influence of heroin, and showing some pretty unflattering footage of him, which there certainly is that in the film. And now one of the things the filmmakers respond with are like, Kurt never wanted to encourage other people to use heroin. That was never his intention. In fact, he really did not like that. So he probably would want, if people see this as this is a reason not to try heroin, that's a positive thing, and that's, one could assume that's what he wants. Whether that's the case or not, I truly don't know. But my one question there, one of the most, I guess, exploitative things that I've ever seen, in regards to a rock star's life, and I'm sure there are other comparable examples, but at one point, they published Kurt Cobain's journals. They took that and published it in a book. And admittedly, I own this because it came out a while ago. I was pretty young. I think I was in high school, and I saw it in a bookstore and did not know what it was. But I thought it was like a tour journal. Like, I thought it was something like he kept a memoir on a tour, and it was going to be like him talking about, maybe playing Reading for the first time or something like that. And I thought that was really cool. Like, my first thought was, I was familiar with Henry Rollins and Get in the Van and stuff like that. I thought this was like that, except it was, Kurt Cobain. So I thought this is going to be awesome. And really quickly, I saw this is the man's diary and journal. And some of it goes back to like even when he was pretty young, and it was like handwritten and stuff. And I don't know who okayed that or who didn't okay that. I don't know a whole lot of the history. I just remember thinking, like, how, I mean, that's terrible that something like that exists. So I'm curious to know, like, where the family stood on stuff like that in terms of exploiting, someone in their death. I feel like nothing does that more than somebody's journals. And having just seen the film, I think that certainly that was way more unflattering towards Kurt Cobain, and certainly intrusive on his life, than this film was. So I'd be curious to know that. That was the first thing that crossed my mind when I heard that the family was not thrilled with it, allegedly, and this was in the press and so forth. Huffington Post had something about it. Now, the film itself, there were a lot of things I enjoyed about it. First of all, unlike most films in regards to Nirvana, this film, or Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, this film actually had Nirvana's music in it. And I'm pretty sure that the reason for this is because Courtney Love was involved with this. There was footage of Courtney Love in this. Courtney Love was interviewed in it, so she cooperated with this, probably because her daughter was involved. But that was going on. So for the first time in a long time, or maybe for the first time ever, I mean, I think about the Michael Azerrad movie that came out, which is called About a Son, and then of course the Kurt and Courtney documentary, the one Nick Bloomfield made that was pretty big. None of those had any Nirvana music in it because Courtney has the rights. She did not sanction any of this stuff. She was against it. So there was no Nirvana music in any of that. So this film had Nirvana music, and it had a lot of it. It had different adaptations of it, different variations of it. There were a couple things I'd never heard before that I was thrilled to hear. Don't want to give away too much, but at one point there's Kurt covering a certain song by a certain artist by himself, and it's pretty. In my opinion, it was pretty special. I'd never heard it before. I really enjoyed it. It's a Beatles. I guess I can say it's a Beatles song. It's a Beatles song, and when he covers it, you kind of see kind of the parallels between a lot of Nirvana's music and some of the Beatles music, in a good way, not in a like, it was ripped off kind of way, but in a kind of positive, like you can see the inspiration and how, they took it and did something different way. So that was really neat. And some of the adaptations of the music, some of the way that they just highlighted his voice, it was really refreshing to actually see Nirvana's music in a film for, again, unless I'm pretty sure the first time ever. I mean, I'm pretty sure even in the 1991 documentary, there wasn't much Nirvana music other than just live footage from whatever band was playing, whether it was Nirvana or it was Sonic Youth. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that they incorporated a lot of Kurt Cobain's art. They incorporated a lot of his sound collages. In fact, Montage of Heck was a sound collage that he did. A lot of that sound collage was featured in the film. As far as the storyline went, it was pretty much your by the book Nirvana story. There was nothing that, at least to me, nothing that came as a surprise. I've read pretty much all the books that are out there, even the ones that speculate whether or not he was murdered. I've pretty much read them all. I'm a big fan of the band, and I'm always curious to read more about that band, especially when I was younger. Because keep in mind, this was before the internet was the resource it is today, and that was kind of my outside window to discovering music and stuff like that, was through like, well, what did Kurt Cobain find cool? Because I should probably listen to that, right? As a kid, that was my logic. So I did. I was a little. I don't want to say let down, but I was a little kind of not. I was hoping maybe there would be a little more with the story that wasn't quite there. It was pretty much, the band happens, the band's going. He eventually, the fame becomes too much. Eventually, the complicated family life with him and Courtney and their drug use, and the daughter came into it, and then the press got involved. All that kind of unfolded exactly the way it always has. And of course, going further back, his childhood, he was a very hyperactive kid. His parents got divorced. That kind of messed him up a good bit, and he never really had that solid foundation. It was interesting to hear about, or to hear from, excuse me, some of the characters that are in the book. For example, one of the things that stuck out to me was Kurt's stepmother, who he has written about, or see, he's talked about in interviews. I guess he wasn't necessarily doing the writing, but he's talked about in his interviews with Michael Azerrad, and he always spoke very negatively of her. And it was interesting to actually see her on camera for the first time. And she actually didn't seem very nice, just for the record. I don't know, maybe I had some preconceived notions because I remember how she was portrayed or spoken about in the books, but she didn't seem like a very nice person. Like, if you ever just, sometimes you just get that vibe from someone like, oh, you seem like you would have been the way he described. I did get that vibe from her. Of course, she's a much older woman now, but listening to her talk and just kind of her demeanor, I got a vibe. I was like, you know what? I can see how his description might be fitting. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a big fan of his music and not hers. I don't know. But that did strike me. And seeing his parents on screen for the first time, it was pretty interesting to see. So overall, I'm really glad I watched it, and I'm glad I watched it right away. For any Nirvana fan, I do highly, highly, highly recommend it. For anyone that's not really familiar with Nirvana, I think this would also be a good first film as opposed to anything else, but solely for the reason that it actually has their music all throughout it. And the way it portrays their music, they have like string adaptations at times, they have chorus adaptations at times, and of course, they have live footage and the sound recording itself. Listening to all that and seeing it all put together in one really just reminded me how great those albums were, and why I loved those albums so much as a kid, and why the first time I heard them, it changed my life because I didn't know. I know it's kind of a cliche. I didn't know music could sound like that, and the first time I heard them, it just wow, everything I knew was wrong. And sometimes when I hear Nevermind for the first time and hadn't heard for a while, or even some of the tracks off of Unplugged in New York, and even in Utero, I mean, pretty much any of their albums, even Bleach, I'm reminded of, oh man, they just made such great music, and who knows what could have happened. I mean, sometimes you can't help but speculate. I do think if Kurt Cobain was alive, Nirvana wouldn't be around anymore, regardless. But you always speculate, like, what would have happened if things didn't go down the way they did? What would have happened if maybe Jay Mascis would have joined the band when it was offered to him? Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr. They would have had Dave Grohl, Jay, and Kurt Cobain all writing songs in the same band. I don't know. Wow. I think. I don't know if there was ever something worthy of John, George, and Paul. I want to say that'd be it. I want to say that would definitely be it. Jay, Kurt, and Dave. But we'll never know. But it is an interesting flick, and for any Nirvana fan, I highly recommend it. Or any non-Nirvana fan that's curious, I still recommend it as well, because at least it's a first. When you see a documentary on a band or you see a film on the band, it's always best if their music is there and if their music is portrayed well. And in this case, for the first time, the music is, and probably because his daughter was involved, so Courtney Love was involved too. So check it out. It's on HBO now. This is Ron Placone signing out.